like to welcome everybody joining us in person and those who may be viewing at home to the February 13th, 2020 Civilian Police Oversight Board meeting. We are going to go ahead and call this meeting to order and lead off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Olivas. Thank you. The mission of the Civilian Police Oversight Board is advancing constitutional policing and accountability for APD in the Albuquerque community. Can I have an approval of the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to public comments. First on our list is Michael Parrish. And just a reminder, you have 3 minutes, sir, okay?
Thank you very much. I was here at the last meeting. I inquired about CPC 95-19, and you said you would let me know. You said you would look into it. Can you tell me what happened?
Director Harness? Do we have
Chair
anything?
Galloway, that CPC, the board ruled on, and then the board denied the appeal.
When?
I will have to get you a specific date, but I know that those letters went out.
Okay. We can take a look. If you will leave your email address, I'll make sure to send you an email with those dates that those letters went out.
Well, that goes to my next question. Who monitors the general email pob@cavq.gov?
It comes to each board member and it goes to the director.
Okay. I emailed you guys using that email address last month, and I didn't hear anything back.
We can't have direct communication with complainants
Okay.
because of the policies and procedures that we have in place. That's likely why you didn't hear from us, but you didn't get anything from the director either?
Nope,
Okay.
nothing.
Okay.
Director?
Yes.
Yeah, you said you checked that. Did you get it?
Well, public comment really isn't for discourse, but as I said, I would get...
Don't avoid my questions. Hey, don't avoid my questions.
As I said, public comment is not for discourse, so you can speak your 3 minutes and then that's it.
Okay. Who on this panel is okay with a felon carrying a gun and a badge?
I'll take a look at when those finding letters went out.
But you
and
told
we'll
me you'd take a look
at the
last
case.
month.
We'll take a look at when the dates of when those letters went out, and I'll email you. I will email you personally
Okay.
on the dates of those letters.
Okay. Mr. Harness, why did you administratively close a case you didn't investigate?
This is not an appropriate use of public
But-
comment.
What,
If you have additional information, additional facts that are pertinent to the case, you can always reopen your case. All administratively closed cases can be handled that way.
but he said that was denied, so how am I supposed to get answers?
I think that it's gone through the process. I think that Member Waits is right. It's probably gone through that, not probably, it would have. It would have gone to the case review committee, it would have gone to the board, and then the appeal would have gone to the board as well.
So when can I ask him questions?
Not right now.
Okay, when?
During public comment. You could email him, I suppose.
Emails, that's not a very good way to do things. I mean, is it?
I'm sorry, but there is a process that has been followed. Director Harness, do you wish to comment further?
It appears that the initial administratively closed letter went out to Mr. Parrish April 16th of 2019, and then the appeal denial letter went out July 18th of 2019.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parrish.
Thanks.
Geraldine Amato. Ms. Amato, welcome back. Just a reminder, you have 3 minutes.
What'd you say? You say that again?
I said just a reminder, 3 minutes, and welcome back.
Well, please let me have the entire 3 minutes. Good evening. I wanted to share a couple of numbers with you, and I hope I get to explain them. 152-559-31, 934-09997. JTGHF10U6 10145-198. I reported 2 personal protection guns as stolen. I haven't found them on file anywhere. Is this an extension of the red flag law? I haven't threatened anybody's life, but since I've been back here in April, 2 attempts have been made on mine, and a third via reckless disregard for my life in the stealing of drugs that were given me at the hospital. I met with 4 different cops to file theft and assault reports. One was given a case number. After the cop talked to headquarters, he put it in a dead file. I noticed that whenever I met with police officers, they checked with headquarters before they gave their final words to me. And I haven't found any of my police reports filed accurately or appropriately. Today we talk about constitutional, whatever you say in your mission statement. If you talk about the Constitution, the federal Constitution has nothing to do with the Republic. The Republic does not exist. And despite the litany of lies that's recited to the federal flag and worship of it at the beginning of these meetings, they are lies. Police would not be ranked in military-style order if the Republic existed. The lawyers would be actually lawyers. They wouldn't be controlled by the Bar Association. Our attorneys that bench in that bar are controlled by a gang that controls the Bar Association. The Albuquerque Journal recent series on the 1980 prison riot brought to my attention what I hadn't noticed, that the riot was a Masonic ritual mass murder. By printing what they did, they actually covered all the elements pertinent to the signature of the Masons. It was an inside job, so now they're doing a couple of forums on KANW hosted by that guy that's an adept at the craft of waltzing around the truth. So I wonder what the spin is going to be on these talks on KANW. Since it was an inside job, what draconian or backward measure are they going to suggest as an improvement on prison safety? We have more criminals in public office today than we have out in the streets. I took a class with Peter Lupshaw here at UNM, and the poignant statement he made during that class, which the class was called Organized Crime and Political Corruption. He said at one time organized crime was outside of government, but well-to-do criminals sent their sons and daughters to law schools, medical schools, the highest and best universities, and they have moved into government. And I will tell you today, my family's a victim of organized crime in the family courts of the 2nd Judicial District and the District Attorney's Office.
Ms.
And
Amato,
I
your
don't see
time
that
is now
anything has
expired.
changed. Well, we should be concerned, Ms. Galloway,
Ms.
that we have
Amato.
organized crime in the 2nd Judicial District, the courts and the District Attorney's Office. And they all claim immunity to accountability under the law, which isn't the law of the Republic. It is the US UCC, which is a commercial code. We
Thank
are
you,
a
Ms.
colony
Amato.
of the international banksters.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
those numbers
Amato.
are recited. 2 of them were for my protection revolver handguns, and the last one was for my stolen vehicle, the VIN number.
Thank you.
Because I reported the serial numbers.
Amato, your time
Wait,
has
I reported
expired.
serial
Ms.
numbers to
Amato,
APD, and they did not record them anywhere
Your
as stolen.
time is
I
expired.
want my guns recorded as
Thank
stolen.
you.
They
That-
did not put them in the stolen file. They lost their serial numbers. That's why I recited them here.
Thank you,
Any
Ms.
questions?
Amato. No, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Ms. Amato? No, thank you. All right, moving on, our agenda, review and approval of the minutes from January 9th, 2020. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those? Any changes that need to be made? Okay, minutes are approved. Reports from city staff, first on the list, and it is a little bit out of order this evening because we have a presentation from APD. So we'll begin with City Council. Mr. Moya.
Madam Chair, board members, good evening. First, I'd like to welcome new board members, Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Starr. Thank you for your interest in serving and commitment to serving on this board. And also, welcome back to Mr. Cass for his second term. We appreciate his commitment as well. We are still working to fill out the rest of the board. We have one candidate here this evening to fulfill that part of the requirement, and then next week we have some meetings with to fill the last vacancy. So I know I wanted to have this board up and running now in February, but we're nearing the end here to have all 9 members appointed to the board, so we're going to continue to work on that. And one other piece of information from the council is they recently added a public safety committee to their standing committees. It's going to be a monthly meeting for 5 members of the council. It's going to be on the first Mondays at noon. There will be a kind of standing place on the agenda for Director Harness and the CPOA to present any sort of updates or anything like that. APD and the fire department also have items on the agenda. And then there'll also be other public safety related legislation to go through that committee as well. But I just wanted to make the board aware of that. And if I'll stand for any other questions that the board may have.
Any luck, any new partnerships or anything with the Southwest area?
Madam Chair, no, nothing quite new yet, but I will be submitting our information for inclusion in the Office of Neighborhood Coordination's weekly email that'll go out on Monday morning.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry, excuse me, Tuesday morning with the holiday on Monday.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Moya? Great, thank you. Next on our list, Mayor's Office. Mr. Aguilar, welcome.
Good evening. Members of the board chair, thank you for having me today. Again, today I come and speak before you, not in my capacity wearing my official city attorney hat, but representing the, delivering remarks on behalf of the mayoral administration following the public hearing that we had on Tuesday. First of all, I want to welcome new members, Mitchell and Starr. Thank you for so much for your service, and we are looking forward to really working with you and the community on this board, so thank you. At the public hearing, I would like to update just briefly, and then Ms. Rose is going to take over and get into some of the more substantive details. But the department presented on the progress of APD in several areas. Primarily, we have finished the use of force policies. Training for officers has been delivered on tiers 1, 2, and 3, and went live, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. It was earlier in January. So, and they are in effect. The city also celebrated the successes with the Crisis Intervention Unit, as well as delivering updates from the Internal Affairs Professional Standards and Internal Affairs Force Division. The Compliance Bureau also provided some significant updates and gave the court a very detailed presentation on the work that they are doing. The amici similarly presented their concerns. I know that this board has also presented its concerns as well and was aware of some of those concerns with the letters presented by the amici in the community. Generally, those were all consistent with the letters that were submitted to the court. Chief Geyer addressed specifically the on-body recording device scorecards that are used to really track compliance in those areas and the development of that over time. He also really explained the effect that those scorecards are having in compliance with the OBRD policies, as well as other progress the department is making towards compliance in those areas. Now, the mayor addressed several issues, including wanting to really celebrate the support that the compliance process has received from not just the community, from city council, from all of our partners in amici. And a big part of that in this past year as well was recruitment and pay for bringing in new cadets and new classes. The mayor outlined some of the successful areas that APD has accomplished over the last reporting period in particular, which are the subject of the paragraphs that are being moved or that are being proposed to move into self-assessment or sustained compliance, which Ms. Rose will talk about and cover a little bit later. He also really detailed and celebrated some of the successes with our behavioral health initiatives at APD and some of the great work that this crisis intervention unit and the COAST teams are actually doing right now within our community. All of that being said, we understand, the mayor understands that this is a process, right? And that we have some significant challenges ahead that we are embracing head on, not the least of which is culture change and working on making sure that through the new use of force policies that we are, and the department is fulfilling its end of the bargain, which at this point I'm fully confident. I'm really proud of the work that they have done as well as the mayor. So the city also identified some of the specific costs relating to the monitoring expenses, which there was a discussion at the hearing with the judge about the $1.5 roughly $1 million that is spent annually on oversight and compliance fees, and there was a discussion about the impact that the sustained compliance motion may have. Ms. Rose again will address some of those some of those issues or questions, but overall we're on a good path. I specifically, taking off my mayoral hat and putting on the city attorney hat, I am aware also of the board's concerns regarding its funding, and want to assure that we are working hand in hand with the council and making sure that the board, working with the Director Harness as well, that we're identifying the needs that the board has and making sure that those pieces like investigators and those pieces are plugged in, and that you have those positions in order to be able to do the work that you're needing to do. So with that, if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them that I can. They're not related to something that Robin's going to cover. So,
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Aguilar? Just real quick, I have one. Do you happen to have what our census is with APD right now? How many uniformed officers we have?
what our census? I'm sorry?
What our numbers are with APD, because I know that there was a pretty big recruitment campaign.
Yeah, I don't, but I will defer. I know APD is here, and they can answer those
Okay.
questions. So,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you all very much, and you'll have a nice evening. Thank you for the work.
Okay, City Attorney's Office.
Good evening. My name is Robin Rose. I'm here from the City Attorney's Office, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Wanted to talk briefly about the hearing that we had on the 11th. Mr. Aguilar was able to handle most of that. We did address some of the amici letters, although the city didn't have a chance to respond to some of the amici concerns that were raised at the hearing. So I just briefly want to talk about a few points that the APD is interested in having the community here, which is just, first of all, some of the questions that were presented had to do with culture change, and what is some of the change in culture that APD has had since we've undergone the consent decree. And I wanted to tell this board that one of the things that's happening at APD now is a revision of IA policies. You all have a representative on the policy. Yes, ma'am. Oh, can you all not hear me? Oh, I can lean forward. So I was just mentioning that we're undergoing some changes in our IA policy. I know that the board has a representative on the policy improvement committee, so we hope to share that with you as the policies continue on. We also, as Mr. Aguilar said, have introduced some scorecards regarding some of our compliance as it pertains to OBRD, the on-body recording device, and that was shared at the hearing as well. I also wanted to touch briefly on some of the training that APD has undergone, and we expect that under the use of force training that you all will see a change in the way that use of force is conducted. Some of that has been covered in the newspaper. It was discussed at the hearing as well. But we expect to see our Internal Affairs Force Division looking at all level 2 and level 3 uses of force. And we hope that that will bring consistency to the investigation and to any kind of discipline that might come from such uses of force. Next, as it pertains to the city's motion for compliance, for moving certain paragraphs into suspended monitoring or sustained compliance, that all has been filed. I understand the board has received a copy of that. Part of what the city's motion contemplates is to move into self-assessment. Self-assessment means that the city will continue to be held to the same account that Dr. Ginger holds us to in terms of the CASA paragraphs. We're still going to have to do everything that we have been doing. But in this group of paragraphs, we have shown operational compliance. That's the highest level of compliance that APD can achieve under the monitor's paradigm. And because we have achieved those for 2 years in almost every single of the paragraphs identified, the city is asking that we be able to monitor and assess ourselves. If you all have questions about the motion, I'm happy to answer those.
Doesn't look like there's any questions.
Are there questions about anything else?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
CPCs? Thanks. Okay, doesn't look like we have anybody here for the CPCs. Is there anybody present for the APOA? Okay, moving right along, APD. And I assume that we're going to do our regular APD report, and then we'll get to crimes against children. Okay.
Good evening. Acting Commander Zach Kocher from Internal Affairs. I'm the Internal Affairs report for January. Total cases that were completed in January, there was 5 completed, and they're out for chain of command review. There were a total of 14 that were actually opened and 12 that carried over from previous months that are still under investigation. Discipline imposed for the month of January, there were 10 cases that did have discipline imposed. 2 were terminations, 4 were letters of reprimand. 1 was a 16-hour suspension, 1 was a 32-hour suspension, 1 was a 10-hour, and 1 was a 40-hour. Early intervention alerts that went out to officers, there was 108 given out in the month of January. And we did not have any cases that went to mediation in the month of January. Any questions?
Do you typically have cases that go to mediation?
It's very rare, maybe 1 or 2 a year is all. We do put it on all of our sheets that mediation is an option in lieu of discipline. When people file their complaints, we do offer the mediation as an opportunity to, not only for CPCs when they go to Mr. Harness, but when they do come into our office as well.
And it's just a little blurb on your forms that says that mediation is available. Is there any other kind of advertising or?
When they fill out the complaint, there is the advertising, but that's about it, ma'am.
Okay, and generally is the mediation not engaged on the complainant's part or on the officer's part?
The complainant's part.
Okay.
It's
Just
very rarely asked for.
Just wanted to make sure that what we're experiencing is in line with what you
It
all
is.
want.
It is something that we kind of push for. We would like to see it used more often, but very few people look as an avenue for remediation for their complaints.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
I'm not sure the term that you used, it was early something.
We have an early intervention system for officers, so it depends on what kind of IA complaints, use of force complaints, crashes. They all get kind of like a point system, and when they hit so many points, that goes out to their supervisor that there's an alert. Their supervisor looks at these instances, makes sure there's no pattern, there's nothing that needs to be addressed. It's designed to identify problems before they become big issues. Currently, this program is actually undergoing a whole new revamp. We're redoing the way that we're going to be addressing it. But it's used to try and identify small problems before they become big issues with officers.
Okay, and are you reporting back to us on the stats for use of force?
I am not.
Okay,
Commander Middleton was going to speak on that
Alrighty.
right after me.
Sounds good. Come on down.
Right, okay, good. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Commander Rob Middleton with the Internal Affairs Force Division. I believe you got the updated version of our use force stats. And it was mentioned a few times tonight that we went live with the new policy. We went live on January 11th of 2020. So the stats for January are going to be a little bit off, and I can explain that if you have some questions too. But the easiest way to do this now is tell you the total. And so for the Foothills Area Command, we had 15 uses of force. The Northeast, we had 12. Northwest, we had 9. Out of area, we had 1. Southeast, we had 18. There were 13 in the Southwest and 14 in the Valley. This is a total number of use of force cases. So prior to January 11th, 2020, we were still under the old use of force policy, and that's where we reported show force, use of force, and serious use of force. And it was investigated by policy under the old CERT unit. So now that we went live on January 11th, we have the Internal Affairs Force Division Force Investigative Section, and we're investigating level 1s, level 2s, and level 3s. And that's the total number. One of the big issues brought up, like why are we going live, or why did we go live with this new policy? It's to have that centralized unit to investigate use of force, where we provide that objective, consistent investigation and outside and removed from the officers who use force. And that's why it remains objective with us. Another reason is so we can free up the field. We had individual commanders in their area commands, lieutenants, and sergeants investigating force, and they all did it somewhat differently. The way we're doing it is consistent, and we now have taken that away from Field Services Bureau, so they're freed up to go do crime fighting, community policing, community outreach, instead of doing use of force investigations. That's our job now. So when you look at this policy of level 1s, level 2s, and level 3s, what we're taking away from the field, we always have taken serious use of force incidents, and the way those are categorized now is a level 3, but we have taken away the level 2s from the field, which would have been the old use of force definition. So just in the month of January, we've taken 51 level 2 use of force investigations from the field, and we took the average amount of time from all 6 area commands of how long it took to investigate a use of force case. We actually broke it down by area command on that second page. It's that green bar graph. But we took the average for all of the area commands, multiplied it by those 51 level 2 cases, and it came out just in 1 month. We've taken away 1,574 hours of investigative time from uniformed police officers in the field. So as citizens of Albuquerque, you know the uniformed police officers in the field are not sitting behind a desk now, spending 1,574 hours investigating use of force. That's our job. It's kind of exciting to see now too. So every month here on out, we'll be under this new system, and we'll be able to show you some information. We'll be able to show you monthly information, annual information about, and we can better define the spikes or anomalies, things like that. I know that happened, like, I think it was the second month out, and we couldn't explain it, but now we can start to show and compare month by month. What you'll see too is in January, we had a higher reporting of use of force incidents than the previous month, and we haven't analyzed that yet, but since we've switched to something new and we kind of expected this, that the use of force reporting would slightly go up because the training was so good. Every officer out there knows what to expect. They know what the definition of level 1, level 2, and level 3 is. We believe that reporting is going to be at a much better level, so it's going to be consistent now. We're going to have more accurate reporting, and that's what we believe why it went up. So, and I can stand for any questions you have. There's probably a lot.
Dr. Cass?
Yes, I think it was last week at a PPRB meeting we were present, and there was an anecdotal example given that the interviews in the field were taking much less time because of the new
Correct.
new process that you created. And would you care to add to that and so the story comes out right? So.
Sure. The level 1 use of force investigations stay in the field, and those are the lowest those are the lowest levels of force that that an officer uses. So, for example, it's a show of force. So anytime an officer pulls out one of our weapons, it could be a less lethal weapon or a lethal weapon, points it at somebody and gives direction or orders, and that person complies without the actual application of force, then that's defined as a show of force. Any other force that is likely to cause only transitory pain, disorientation, or discomfort by the application is categorized as a level 1. So that's the lowest level. Anything beyond that is a level 2 and level 3. So we trained the entire department on how to conduct a level 1 investigation. And we have a data form and an evaluative narrative form that the field can use now. And along with that comes a guide. So the guide walks the chain of command through on how to investigate a level 1. And in this facilitated environment of training at the academy, it's something new rather than the death by PowerPoint like was described in court on Tuesday. The investigators in the field now will be able to walk through in a data collection process rather than an open narrative process. So in the training, everybody was assigned a level 1 mock investigation, and on average, it took everybody in the entire police department 45 minutes to complete this level 1 investigation. We had a few bumps this first month where some officers were calling us, and they would call in and say, it's taken me a couple hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, and we said, okay, let's look at it. So when we looked at it, we said, okay, you're still applying the old method where you're writing this big, long, open narrative. Just follow the guide, and you'll see that it works. So then we started getting more feedback after giving the follow-up direction, and that time is being compressed now to about 45 minutes to an hour.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, just a comment. I think taking away the level 2 is going to be huge. It's going to be real important. It frees up those sergeants and give them opportunity to do more training, better training.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. And then just to follow up on that too, in court on Tuesday, it was repeated over and over again about first-line supervision. If we can have our first-line supervisors, those sergeants, and this is described too, the three stripes on their sleeve, if they're out there in the field supervising their squad, providing that direction to their police officers in the field, that's where you all, the citizens of Albuquerque, want them. You don't want them behind a desk. You want them out there directing their officers.
I agree. Thank you.
So I have a question, and it's not necessarily, in fact, I don't know that it's fair to say that it has anything to do with use of force, because the example that was given to me was with OBRDs. But I was doing a ride-along, and the whole team, the sergeant and all of her officers that she was supervising, asked me to join them for coffee. And one of the concerns that they brought up to me was that they don't feel as though Internal Affairs has taken into consideration what the sergeant might have to say in defense of her officers if there's a policy violation. And I'm just kind of wondering what communication, how much of a part they played in the development of any new policies that are being written and implemented that kind of remove them from the aspect of investigating policy violations of any sort, not just use of force.
I just want to make sure I understand the question too. So it sounds like a sergeant wants to have some sort of input in our investigation into a policy violation based on the character of the police officer?
Not necessarily the character, but also extenuating circumstances that may be at play. For example, like on that particular ride-along, the officer that I was riding with had one OBRD that wasn't working and was back at the station, and the other one's battery died, but the charger was broken for it, so it wasn't connecting, and it had to be, charged at the station. Just extenuating circumstances that might come into play if, for example, he was called out on an emergency call and his OBRD wasn't working.
I can answer an exact process that can explain how the officer is treated completely fairly, and then I can go into the input that sergeant has and anything that she has a lot of tools available to her. So the officer, if we send the officer a target letter for an OBRD violation, that officer is notified then to come into the Internal Affairs Force Division, and this is related to a use force incident because we would be sending the target letter out. So if it's to notify them that they're to come in for an interview. During that interview, it's the officer's responsibility to answer all of our questions truthfully and provide any I think like you said, extenuating circumstances or anything. And we do listen to those from the officer. They are allowed a representative as well during that interview, and they can provide all the facts to us that happened that day. So if, we've seen it before, so if the charger was broke, or if the camera was kicked off, or if the power was kicked off, because these are dynamic situations when they're involved in any fight with somebody, those are circumstances that we take into consideration to mitigate any sort of disciplinary action, right? And the sergeant has a lot of input on this process. There's a collective bargaining agreement for the union, and all these officers are protected by that agreement. That sergeant also has input in Power DMS when any of these policies go live to provide input. There's also a PPRB process that they can be a part of too and provide input. So there's many different angles to affect how their officers are, I almost said treated, but to provide input in their officer's case.
Okay. It could have been no one-off, but it was just an interesting perspective that I got from them while I was doing that ride-along. So I
Sure.
appreciate that. And it's not a process that's not familiar, but I think it may be one that maybe just needs to be relayed again. You know, sometimes you just go about your day and
Right.
forget what options are available to you, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
Is that it? All right. Thanks.
That's a good point. For those of you who are joining us, we also have two brand-new board members who are not as familiar with the acronyms that are being used. So it may be kind and generous of you to spell out what those are. OBRD, on body recording device, for my part. All righty. Crimes against children, I think Dr. Kess, you were going to introduce them, correct?
Yes, the next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Crimes Against Children Unit, and I'd like to give you a little background. This was decided at a recent board meeting that we would try to bring some light, shed some light on the processes that were involved when Crimes Against Children Unit was called out, and it relates to special or cases which have been in the news over the last year or two. And so I went and met with Commander Burke and Lieutenant Sanders, who's about to give the presentation, I believe, and we worked out what it is that they were comfortable saying, which I think is, you'll find out, they can say quite well. And we focused on some areas that were of particular interest. One was a problem that our investigators see, which is that when a child is removed from the home, that seems to be the most one of the most sensitive sorts of processes and one source of complaints. And so understanding that process was one of the things that I hope we'll hear about tonight. I expect we will. So I'll let them go ahead, however they're going to present this. We will have some time at the end for questions and answers, and including questions from the audience. So go ahead, please.
Good evening, everybody. As I was introduced, I'm Lieutenant Nicholas Sanders, the Albuquerque Police Department. I run the juvenile section under the Criminal Investigations Division. I'm going to present to you the overview of what my section is, go into the questions that were asked of me, and hopefully progress with some good information and clarity with this. So to start off, my section, the juvenile section, covers three different types of units: the Crimes Against Children Unit, the Child Exploitation Unit, and the Sex Offender Registry that falls underneath the City of Albuquerque's responsibility. Our SOP sections primarily fall under 5-4. They are broken down into 5-5, 545, 546. Specifically, I was asked to bring information about 292, which is the subsection specifically responsible for crimes against children and outlines the process for investigations both with the detectives and with the field officers' response to juvenile calls. So just under our section from 292, to give an overview of what we investigate the unattended death of any child under the age of 18. We investigate any injuries that are sustained to individual that's 5 years or under, any serious injuries to a individual that is 13 years or under, and we are revamping the way that we are investigating criminal sexual contact and criminal sexual penetration of juveniles, so anybody under the age of 17. Historically, we have been responsible for the children that are at the age of 12 or under for criminal sexual contact and criminal sexual penetration. A separate investigatory unit was responsible for those that were above the age of 13. There was also an avenue of non-household member that was under that guise to determine where that went. We have worked with that investigatory unit to streamline that process better, to bring those investigations in under the purview of crimes against children specifically. And we're looking at utilizing our sex crimes unit to also further support those types of investigations due to our expertise in juvenile investigations and their expertise in investigations with crimes dealing with the sexual nature. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of serious injuries, that's the one that we normally get for children that are at the age of 12 or below. We look at anything that's going to cause great bodily harm or disfigurement. We're looking for broken bones where medical intervention is necessary, such as hospitalization. Anything that has an internal inflicted injury, burning, scalding, or any kind of head injury that requires medical responsibilities. To talk a little bit about how we get involved, there's primarily 3 different ways that either crimes against children or our field officers get involved into a juvenile call for service. The predominant one that we have is something that comes from SCI, which is a statewide central intake. Our secondary is simply that we get calls from the public requesting our response to some sort of juvenile situation. The last is basically an on-site investigation, lends itself over to some part of a juvenile investigation. The statewide central intake has historically been given to us in one manner, and I'll talk about that in a second, and we've changed that manner to try to streamline information a little bit better. So the old way that came about after a 2014 multidisciplinary task force review of how CACU and APD does their juvenile investigations led to that more communication through the SCI process into APD would be beneficial to ensure that more children are being seen at what could be considered a critical point. The effect of that decision-making went to a process to where SCI received a abuse or neglect call, and that call would be immediately dispatched over to the Albuquerque Police Department for a field officer response. As demonstrated up on the board, what we would see would SCI would call in that information to APD. APD would respond, would do an investigation, determine validity or methodology to continue that investigation, then report back into SCI about what they had discovered and what was the outcome of the investigation, which created another SCI report, which then started the process all over again. So what we were seeing when I got there was that officers were being redispatched to the same address for same information, just from a different source, because under a SCI report, the source has to remain anonymous. So we started to see a loop process. This loop would usually bring officers to a house possibly 2 to 3 times prior to CYFD arriving to that house for various reasons. So we sat down with our partners over at CYFD and SCI and started to evaluate that process to try to find something that could alleviate this loop process and then streamline the information that is being flowed between the 2 entities. So the new process, and I apologize, I'm under the weather, but the new process was implemented in June of 2019 and is currently still in place. The new process goes along the lines that as SCI receives an emergency or priority 1 dispatch call, so we're back to the serious injury of a child. As they receive that information that there's imminent danger to the child or a serious inflicted injury already upon the child, they will call our dispatch system and immediately request officers to go out, and officers go out for that investigation. They are also supplied information from the SCI report that could be crucial for them to make the decision about where to go with the investigation. What is different from the original is that priority twos and screen outs now come into the Crimes Against Children unit for screening process. This was done because we were able to isolate that priority twos and screen outs under the CYFD guidance was not those imminent dangers. We were looking at calls to where children were missing a doctor's appointment because of some reason that was legitimate. However, officers were going out to investigate this. An investigation that involves a child can be very traumatic to them, and reducing that traumatic event simply over lice and hair or eyeglass issues was something that we wanted to try to intervene in, but we also wanted to create a layer of security that we could review these to ensure that there were not criminal elements that were being missed. So the SCI intake system was initiated, and my unit has 2 administrative individuals that screen all SCI reports that come in, try to identify any concerning elements that they have or criminal elements. They provide that to the next layer, which is a supervisor, so it either goes to myself or my sergeant. We then review it with any additional pertinent information that we may go ahead and try to touch into, and then we make a decision whether or not a field officer needs to respond to that, or some screen outs do involve an post-injury, so we can immediately take those over and bring those into the Crimes Against Children unit and start an investigation through that process. The cross-reporting system that created the loop was changed over to where an officer from the field can email their report upon completion under the criteria that no new victims were identified, no new offenders were identified, or no new allegations were brought to the table. If any of those 3 were brought up, they are still mandated to call in SCI to create a new report. However, SCI also will screen that through their own system to determine what's the next best outcome for their CYFD investigators. So we've really become pretty unified in the way that we're responding, and we've really seen a lot of progression with these types of calls to identify what officers need to be going to, what my detectives need to be involving themselves in, or where we can build a conjoined response with CYFD in a quicker method. This slide, I know it's kind of small, but it shows an avenue of how we investigate our SCI reports. So I'm a numbers kind of individual, and I want to know the information to make sure I can either validate or find where we're losing some information. So on our SCI reports, we record the daily number that we review, the amount that come in for review under the supervision, the amount that go out to specialized units, the amounts that are accepted into our unit, and any additional concerns that we might identify. We've been recording this information pretty much since we've gone live. We're averaging a screening system of about 260 SCI reports a week, and we have been able to identify areas that we are now being able to better intervene in, such as reports getting lost in our system. And what I mean by that is through our SCI report system and this, we've identified to where officers have gone out to a call for service. They have not had a contact because either time of dispatch, personal life configurations of a family not being home, or some other reason. However, that we still need a response out to that area. So we found that loophole, and we've been able to monitor that and re-dispatch officers through the system that we've implemented. Now, for the investigation process, I was asked about community caretaker, how that might apply for officers intervening into a call for service to where individuals were reluctant to allow officers into the residence to check on the welfare of a child. We have to consider that children that we investigate are looking at the age of 17 and under. Most of the ones that we are involving ourselves in are of an age that is about 12 and below. Their ability to protect themselves, call for resources or other things is a high consideration both in the prosecution and in the courts, and justification for why we go forward or progress into a residence that may be reluctant to allow us in. Under the community caretaker policy within the Albuquerque Police Department, it primarily goes over what would be considered a mental crisis issue or mental health issue that dictates an officer needs to go in and immediately render some sort of aid or intervention. One part of the community caretaker guise is that if we enter under that pretext, then the criminal elements that may be discovered thereafter will not be very applicable into a court process. They could easily get suppressed. With that, under the community caretaker, we do not look at that or really utilize that in juvenile calls. As I talked about initially, we get a report from the SCI system or some sort of public entity outlining the specifics of some sort of concern. That concern raises to the level of reasonable suspicion for the officer to sit there and investigate whatever crime it is. Under the reasonable suspicion, if we get to a location that we're having individuals that are refusing to allow us into the residence to check on what could be considered a helpless victim, we have the reasonable suspicion to go ahead and go forward with that into the residence to check on the welfare of the child and to continue in the process of investigation to probable cause for arrest if it does develop to that level. Some of the additional questions were some of the changes that were implemented in 2018 after a few different calls for service and different investigations that could have possibly been handled in a better means. The special orders that were questioned of me were 18-70, 18-71, 18-72. 18-70 talks about OBRD use, the on-body recording device use, and the retention of evidence in abuse and neglect cases against children. That special order has not and does not appear to be going forward towards any type of revision. And I support that policy wholeheartedly due to the way that our investigations go. There is a system of pretty much historic investigations with crimes against children because those that we need to disclose for evidentiary reasons are the children, typically do not disclose necessarily on the first interaction, or the evidence is not present during the first investigation, and we've seen a tendency to have repetitive calls or repetitive investigations. Retaining evidence from the OBRD system, whether it's from the field services or from my investigators, has proved invaluable to be able to show a historical progression in crimes to help us in the prosecution method. 1871, the mandate of the RTCC to check the CYFD portal, which is also referred to as CYFD fax system, is the concept that all officers, we gained access to the CYFD portal or their fax system to input certain information into to determine whether or not there was historical investigations by CYFD on a certain individual, on a certain location, or on a certain child. As that technology developed, the system became a lot more user-friendly, and we were able to gain access through our real-time crime center to check that resource, an invaluable resource. So 1871 outlined and mandated that all field officers and all juvenile calls will be checked against the CYFD portal for historical information. It's proven very extremely invaluable. From whether we can see if historical claims are identical, if sustained investigations have been occurred, who may be a current case investigator from the CYFD side to help us further the investigation. That's all through that system. There is going to be a change, reference that special order coming up through the SOP revision, our standard operating procedures revision of crimes against children. That revision is going to allow the officers the ability to do that check themselves. In the summer of 2019, I implemented a mandated training throughout the department to push all officers into portal training. This was to not only give them the additional resource, but to expose them to what the valuable information is within that resource. Approximately 90% of the department has gone through that training. The rest of the individuals that have not, it's because of FMLA or military or other avenues. But what it did was give those officers that ability to immediately check that resource rather than relying on the RTCC. The portal will remain a mandated check. There is ways for us to utilize the portal to ensure if an officer states that they checked it, that they did check it. And we can also review what information they utilize to try to do that check through this process. What we've seen since the implementation of the training is that more officers are using this resource. More officers are very understanding of the value of the resource. It is speeding up the time in response to juvenile calls simply due to resource availability within the RTC compared to resource availability in the field. And one additional outlook that we did not anticipate was our specialized units have become very user-friendly to this database due to their special investigations. It's an advantage for them to know child historical incidents at the residence for either investigatory means or for preparatory means for any type of interaction into that residency that their investigation may go forward to. Special Order 1872 talks about the gathering of all potential physical evidence. This special order, I know I have talked to our evidence side with, and we are looking at a more clarified language within that special order. We have not modified the special order, and officers are still required to identify pertinent information and to retain that pertinent information, whether it's an item at the residence or not. However, the idea of potential physical evidence is a little bit of a broad stroke, and it's a consistent question that we get through our investigations is what is valued and what is not valued. And we are attempting to review that with our city legal, with our evidence, to identify a more specific means to assist the officers in fully identifying the most pertinent evidence and ensuring that that evidence is collected. One of the avenues that I mentioned on 2 slides back was a checklist system. So as our field officers get their Sky reports or other means to interact with a juvenile call for service, one of the things that we started seeing where officers were calling us for insight prior to arrival. Officers were not asking enough pertinent questions to either activate or rule out the necessary response from crimes against children. So what we did is we sat down and looked at what were those pertinent questions and pertinent information that was necessary for us to go out or to help guide the officers through the call for service to identify where they needed to go. And we developed a checklist and implemented that checklist. It is a guide for our field officers at this point in time and is going under a revision back to due to the change of responsibilities with our criminal sexual penetration and criminal sexual contact cases. Since our implementation of the checklist, we've been able to really streamline how to get CYFD involved, how to get CYFD out there, how quickly CYFD can get out there, how quickly we can respond, and what resources may be necessary prior to our arrival or have already started prior to our arrival. So it's really bolstered our communication and our relationship with the field officers to ensure that the children calls are being served quickly and effectively. As I stated, I was asked about a few different questions and a few different ways of investigation. I've talked now about how we get our calls for service, our special order changes in 2018. I'm going to talk to you now about how an investigation goes with crimes against children themselves as far as our detectives being called out. So as I stated, almost all of these start with the Field Services Bureau. They will go out, they will identify a concern of some sort of a felony level. They will go ahead and call us. We will go over the checklist with them to make sure that certain resources are available or already coming out there, such as a crime scene investigator to photograph and start processing evidence, such as a CYFD investigator to help us with any avenues that may come out with a what we refer to as a 48, and I'll get into that on the next slides. To give a walkthrough of a call, let's imagine that our field officers respond to a child that is 3 years old who's got labored breathing. The call is initially sent to the Albuquerque Fire and Rescue simply because it's a medical concern. They get on scene, they notice something that is suspicious, whether it's parental response, evidence at scene, some sort of circumstances. They contact APD, APD goes out and starts to go in the level of maybe this is a skull fracture or other concerning level of a felony nature. The field services will conduct their investigations, such as separating the parents, identifying potential evidence, and they will begin the checklist while calling us within Crimes Against Children to notify us about the call. We will review the checklist with the field services officer to ensure the information is accurate and what additional things may be going on that we would need to respond to. Once that checklist is reviewed with the field officers, we will go ahead and initiate ourselves to a response out to whatever call it is. While we are going to the call, we'll be contacting the Real-Time Crime Center to help us through the portal background check to identify anything additional. We ourselves, once we get on scene, will also be utilizing that portal system in conjunction with the CYFD investigator. That CYFD investigator will also either already have been called by our Field Services Bureau. If not, they will be directed by my Crimes Against Children units to call them, or we will be calling them as we are going out to that scene. It is extremely typical that when we go onto a scene like a child with labored breathing, that possibly because of a skull fracture, that the CYFD investigator is already either arrives when we arrive, just prior or just after, but that our investigations are pretty much paralleled due to the circumstances of what the investigation is. We also start a secondary detective to assist with the investigation due to interviews or other evidentiary needs such as warrants writings. A supervisor is notified of the concerning call to make determinations if anything additional is necessary. And we ensure that any additional resources are available if they are needed, such again as the crime scene investigator or crime scene investigator supervisor to necessitate a possible full call out if we encounter a time that a child passes away as a result of some sort of an injury. Down arrows work to change the slides too. All right. Once we are on scene, we'll conduct our initial interviews with parents or any other parties that could be considered witnesses. We attempt to identify any indicators of neglect or abuse. If we identify any concerns of that nature, we then will start working with the on-call major crimes DA detective to process either arrest or search warrants for retention of evidence or the arresting of a potential offender. We will also identify any additional children, or if the child is if the child is just under a serious injury, then we start a notification of a 48-hour hold. The 48-hour hold has to be in conjunction with CYFD. The state or law enforcement entity is the only one that can initiate, or is the only one that can execute a 48-hour hold. However, it has to be done in conjunction with the State Department, quote unquote CYFD, for the placement of the children or other children into a foster or care system. If this guise does go underneath the criminal element, we will obtain the search warrants or arrest warrants. We will serve those search warrants and arrest warrants and proceed down the investigation in parallel with the district attorney's office to determine next best steps. If the same scenario arises, however, the initial indications are leaning towards a possible accidental injury, which is a common avenue that we do see. We then start relying heavily upon the UNM Pediatrics CART system, Child Abuse Response Team, which are specialized trained doctors at UNM to identify historical or causations of injuries. We usually get those CART exams within about 24 hours back to us, and we're able to review that information with the doctors along with the district attorney's office to determine causation and accountability. Again, if this process goes under the avenue of this was simply an accident, a poor accident, but still an accident, we will still go ahead and complete an investigation case with it. We will still file that case for any future necessary revisiting to that. If there are a concern developed out of the accidental injury that develops into possible neglect, but not necessarily criminal neglect, we will still work with CYFD to conduct a 48-hour hold on the child that is injured and potentially any other children that are inside that residency. Again, also even under a accidental injury system, we may go ahead and serve search warrants at the residence to photograph the area that the accident happened to go ahead and verify the likelihood of the events described to us. As with any investigatory group, we maintain our investigations and continue post-investigations depending upon what circumstances happen. Some of those post-investigations include safe house interviews with the children, where a forensic interviewer speaks with the child to try to get a disclosure of evidentiary reasons or negate statements made to us by any of the parties. We will possibly review phones or other evidentiary matters to, again, prove or disprove the timeline of events that is described to us in the case. These investigations are always in parallel with CYFD due to the safety and the concerns with the child or any other child, to ensure that all pertinent information is provided to CYFD so they can continue to make the best judgments on their processes for retention of the children or return of the children. One of the additional questions I was asked about was the process of a 48-hour hold, how it applies to the Albuquerque Police Department, and how we go forward with it. A 48-hour hold is going to fall underneath the Fourth Amendment rights of search and seizure. Basically, we are seizing an individual against their will, even though they're a child. It's still, they have rights. That is why the 48-hour holds has to be conducted by a law enforcement entity. It cannot be conducted by a civilian entity. However, under the New Mexico Children's Code, Section 32A46 outlines specific criteria for the removal of a child under a 48-hour hold. That code parallels with two avenues of either a CYFD investigation in conjunction with law enforcement, leads to either immediate injury to the child or imminent injury to the child, at which time CYFD contacts the law enforcement entity and requests the 48-hour hold to be initiated, and the paperwork to do such hold is completed. The other part is where the officers observe immediate or imminent danger to the child, either through pre-existing injury or conditions observed at the location the child is found at. And then we get in parallel again with CYFD and advise them that we wish to conduct a 48-hour hold, and the paperwork again is started with the 48-hour hold. The 48-hour hold process, once the paperwork is completed, which is always done on scene, it is fairly quick information provided to CYFD that is going to be a 48-hour hold, and the report, the officer's report will be provided to them for that justification. CYFD takes custody of those individuals and usually transports them either to a foster care system or back to their facilities, waiting to identify a foster care system for those children. The system is fairly effective. We have not seen any kind of major hiccups. I have been to the CYFD facility to where sometimes children are transported to. They have a large amount of amenities there for children to either play, to be fed, to be bathed. It is a well-established system to ensure the care of the children that may be removed. One aspect of removal of children into the CYFD 48-hour hold system is something called short stays. This is simply a graph information about short stays. Since the implementation of the changeover of the SKY system, short stays are down within the state. To give an example of a short stay would be that we or CYFD dictates that a 48-hour hold has to be done. The child is removed, however, returned to some sort of either directly back to those parents within before the 48 hours is done, or is given to a co-parent, like a grandparent or other individual that removes the 48-hour hold. The 48-hour hold under the short stays is predominantly information to where that child is retained into state custody, not necessarily given over to foster care. That would be the parents or grandparents or such individuals similar. Those children that are returned in any of those aspects, CYFD initiates something called a safety plan, which is an agreement between those parties and CYFD that certain conditions will be met and maintained. And CYFD continues to monitor those processes as it goes forward with the retention and care of the child. I was asked about recent changes within CACU and something that we're going forward with possibly. These are the changes that have been implemented since I came into the unit in about March of 2019. We've implemented, like I showed, the field services checklist. We have implemented a suspicious juvenile death call-out procedure within the unit to parallel homicides to ensure that we are doing the best practices forward. We have modified our on-call rotation to ensure the safety and welfare of our detectives due to the content that they investigate. We have implemented a new care training program that has 24 hours of additional training. We are at approximately 45 care officers available to respond. Those are those are specialized child abuse response experts inside the field to respond to those calls. We are looking to expand that program up to 100 officers. We have done the CYFD portal training to all field officers and additional investigators to educate them on the value of that system. We're going to initiate a supervisor and FTO training system to ensure that our supervisors and our FTOs are on the utmost educated list of juvenile calls and the proceedings. We have changed the way that we do our caseload distribution to ensure that our detectives are not overwhelmed with cases, and we can give our best effort to investigate a case as timely as possible. We've implemented a SHIELD integration to our system. Those are individuals that help us compile all the additional data that is necessary to prosecute a case through the district attorney's office, which has sped up our case system. We are going to implement a reminder system and automation through our SharePoint to ensure our detectives are aware of their case responsibility and we can track the progression of the cases more accurately. We have implemented a lot of community outreach, including education through the community or the Citizens Police Academy. We have taught all APS crossing guards on means to identify child abuse and where to go forward with reporting that child abuse. We are going to implement a citywide awareness program called Save Jane, targeted for April 1st of this year. And the last thing that I'll talk about is something that we're looking to implement that we want to call 5-0 Angels. The 5-0 Angel system is that through the Administration for Children and Families, Health and Human Services, the American Society for Positive Care of Children, childhelp.org, we've been able to isolate a concerning age group for child death and injury, major injury. That age group is from 5 and under, basically from birth up to the years of 5. That's why we want to call them 5-0 Angels. The concept behind it shows that 80% of child fatalities involving children under the age of 5 have an indication that they have not started school yet, that they have not been attending their regular wellness checks from infancy, and that they've had some sort of contact with the system, such as a Sky report. We're going to be looking at identifying a system to look for 3 Sky report referrals, a system of notification through pediatrics to where infants that are born that miss their welfare checks immediately after birth or shortly thereafter are notified to us so we can look at that avenue. And what we want to create is a partnership directly with CYFD and an officer to respond to these identified families, to offer resources, to identify what may be the reason why this child is not making the welfare checks, why this child has not been enrolled into school yet, what avenues could be done through resources to bolster this family and bolster this child's ability to thrive. The law enforcement aspect of conjoining with that is also to allow for the legal process if we start identifying a major concern there on scene that dictates immediate response. I apologize that I have gone for longer than what was given. I was given a lot of questions and there was a lot of information that needed to be provided. I am open for questions.
Thank you very much for this. I mean, you covered a lot of ground, and I would like to open it up for questions. I'll start with my question, and that is, kind of an overview, and that is, there seems to me there's a critical decision time when a child has been determined to be in, maybe has been injured and maybe should be removed from the home. And I presume that both APD and CYFD, or CACU and CYFD, are on the scene at a situation like that. And who then makes the decision, or how is that decision made to do a child removal from the home and start the process where you separate you get the child into a safe environment, and I presume then that APD focuses on the criminal aspect of this, but their initial involvement has to be in order to establish some kind of a criminal aspect in order to do a removal. I don't know if I said that very clearly, but that's the understanding I have of the process. Would you comment on that, please?
So the removal of a child can be done under abuse or neglect. So neglect can be kind of a broad stroke as far as living conditions can be considered neglectful to a child, and that could initiate the process for a 48-hour removal hold. The 48-hour holds are almost, I would say, at a 99% conjoined decision that is made between CYFD and APD, whether it's a field officer or the Crimes Against Children unit that is out there. And the goal of that is the benefit of the child at the immediate scene that is identified. The goal of CYFD is the reunification of a child into the family. As difficult as it may be for us to look into a family that we are not necessarily supportive in all of their actions, the removal and the keeping of a child from that family can create long-term negative outcomes for that child to thrive throughout their lifetime. CYFD's major goal is that reunification with the implementation of resources, guidance, safety tools, and other things to help develop that family into a more ideal situation to allow that child to thrive as best as possible. The removal of the children, like I said, is in 99% of the time is a conjoined decision. The return of the child and the processes of retention of the child into state custody is not under the responsibility of APD. It's under the responsibility of CYFD to go forward with that. The New Mexico Code gives CYFD 48 hours to present their case to a judge as to why that child needs to be retained into state custody. That burden can be fairly large that CYFD has to be able to present to a judge. And that is why they have their fallback tools of safety plans, resource integration, and other means to both do a positive reunification of the child, but also to consistently monitor that system to ensure the safety of the child.
Thanks.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, and I'm going to kick it over to you, Leonard. How often is it like a 100% success rate that the CYFD is able to get before a judge to make that case, to even get there, to get enough evidence together or whatever to be able to do that, or do they time out of that process?
I don't have that specific information. That'd be a better question for CYFD to answer. I
Okay.
do know that with any process, timelines and presenting evidence can be burdensome. We work closely with the investigators to provide what we can to them to foster this. I have not seen a failure in any of the major cases that my unit is responsible for, if that can answer their part of your question.
On your part, thanks, Leonard.
That was a great presentation, thank you. I just have a couple questions. Is this a separate unit from the regular APD? Your unit is separate from the officers that are in the street? Right?
Yes.
Okay. So how many officers do you have?
I've got 8 detectives assigned to me right now
Detectives.
that are within just the Crimes Against Children unit with my sergeant.
So the officers that go on scene are just regular officers in the street, correct?
Yes, sir.
So how are they trained?
Their training would probably be better answered specifically through our academy training. However, we do take our Crimes Against Children detectives and we go and do provide educational training to them. They do receive real-life scenarios that involve juvenile calls. They receive additional education once they graduate from the academy with their investigatory follow-up course. We are looking at implementing the portal training that I spoke about into that investigatory course to provide those new officers even more education. And then additionally, on top of all of the education, their application knowledge is done through the field training program, which they go through for 4 months, which includes them taking juvenile calls for service to ensure that they are knowledgeable of all the processes that are necessary. And the last fallback that any officer has is always to contact either their supervisor for guidance or my unit for additional guidance.
Yes, sir.
When field services contacts a juvenile, and by that I mean anybody under 18, and they're engaged in prostitution, is that an automatic referral to you guys?
That would not be an automatic referral to us. That would, depending upon their age and the circumstances, that may be handled under our vice unit. It is an automatic referral into the SCI system, which then will come across our avenue. Dependent upon the information that was obtained through that field contact, that would be a thing that would be more handled either through vice or my child exploitation division.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else down there? Yes.
So you commented on, the trauma that it imposes removing a child or escalating an investigation to the next level. But I think in some of the most disturbing cases we've seen have involved probably where that escalation wasn't made, or maybe wasn't made in a timely manner. And obviously that's a difficult decision in the moment in the field for your officers, and they're looking at whatever evidence is presented to them. Can you comment on perhaps how that's improved, or if there has become a more streamlined process for the field officers to use to sort of determine whether or not to escalate a situation, and what kinds of resources have been deployed for them in the recent past to make that decision easier and more accurate, I guess?
That would go back to our annual or biannual MOE training to educate officers about the process of juvenile investigations, to educate the supervisors about decision-making and progression of juvenile calls. Specific things for my unit that we provided outwards is the checklist to identify any major concerns that would elevate a call for service to us, or to guide those officers to criminal codes to clearly state what they need to progress with. The special orders with the potential gathering of the evidence has assisted them with that process. There's a separate special order that the department has implemented that prior to calling a specialized unit, the information has to go through a sergeant, and that sergeant has to call the specialized unit. So there's many layers that are there now to get many different individuals' input and expertise into that prior to even getting to my unit. Again, the field services also works in parallel with CYFD. On all juvenile calls, they have access to the portal system to look at that. They have access to criminal history through the Real-Time Crime Center or their own investigatory means. There's a lot of positive layers that have been implemented and effective.
Tara, did I see that you had one?
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. Along the same lines of the questions that both of the prior two members have asked, and maybe you're answering it and I'm not processing it, but the field officers, when they come across, say they're following up on a report that a child has been harmed in some way, what type of training do they have that may be specialized for, like, interviewing children in terms of assessing whether those children have been harmed?
We have relied heavily on our care officers to be that additional specialized training level for those types of calls and a resource to the field services. They receive 24 additional hours of training. That training specifically goes under the investigatory methodology that CACU utilizes, which does talk about questioning of children, how to do the questioning of a child. The questioning of a child, whether it's from field services, care officer, or even a CACU detective, has been guided to be very limited. We predominantly look for environmental or physical avenues, and it goes back to the traumatization of the child. To give a perspective of that, if an officer goes on scene and notices that a child has a broken arm, we ask the parents, how did the arm get broken? We're not getting a consistent story or supportive evidentiary reasons. We then start suspecting, hey, something might have happened. We may ask, or a field officer may ask a question or two of the child, but pretty much it is very limited to that child. The field services would then call us. We would initiate the safe house. And that is where the forensic interviewer would go in and, in a child-friendly environment, speak to the child and identify evidentiary support or disproving concerns. That interview is attended by a detective and can be attended by a field officer if they request. We do have the ability to interact into that investigation and that interview if possible. But the benefit of doing it in a child-friendly civilian expertise capacity is the returns of the disclosures that we get. We seem to get a better return of disclosure. Children are much more likely to respond positively in that environment and clearly state what events occurred that injured them. And again, we limit that exposure of trauma to the child.
So then when the field officer originally interacts with the child, once they've deemed it necessary to ask a few questions, are they using the checklist that you're referring to? How do they decide when to escalate? Is there a process?
The checklist would be the escalation process for them to make that decision and the review of that checklist with their supervisor prior to calling our on-call system. Again, every investigation and response by a field officer is unique, so they're going to evaluate the totality of the injury comparative to the environment and comparative to the responses they get from the parentals.
Thank you very much.
Catherine?
Thank you again for that presentation. My question is also revolves around training. Do you have the ability, or have you had the ability yet to joint train with CYFD for response times, for, like with the 48-hour removal, you said that it's sometimes a joint decision between your unit and CYFD. Do you guys have the ability to do joint training with APD and CYFD?
We have the ability, if we wanted to joint train. Our relationship with CYFD is extremely positive. They've been just very receptive of trying to figure out the best pathways forward. We have several different entities and layers implemented to do policy, procedure, case scenario reviews that are attended both by my unit, CYFD, UNM Pediatrics, and other entities. The cross-training, I don't necessarily see a full benefit of doing a cross-training for like a 48-hour hold. We have done educational events with CYFD where we have educated each other about our processes and why we go forward with each process. Not necessarily as a training avenue, but as why our decision-making may go down this pathway compared to theirs, which again, as I mentioned, the relationship between us is great, and that has greatly improved the response times that we're seeing from the investigators, their response times that they're seeing from our field officers or our detectives. It's been positive.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? Because I do. Don't get excited to leave just yet. I'm just opening it up for everybody else.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you again on behalf of the board, and we'll be in touch. I really appreciate your coming down. I think this is a very enlightening talk, and I applaud what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn. I just want to make sure that I understood correctly. You guys get 260 Sky reports roughly a week, and you've got 2 admins that are kind of filtering through those, and, okay. And the supervisors are going over what's been filtered out?
So the filtering system that we look at for, it's already pre-filtered by Sky in itself. So what Sky is looking for is either imminent or existing dangers or injuries to a child. So those fall under their priority 1s and emergencies. Those immediately go to the field. Those field officers immediately respond. The priority 2s and the screen out systems are predominantly that there may be a criminal element or there's usually a societal issue where we get source reports of, a third party is concerned because child has not attended school for 3 days. We get a lot of those, and what we do with the process is our admins will contact APS to try to identify, what reasoning is behind this child not attending school to see if we do need to go out or not. A majority of those that we see is that a child has been removed from the school or the school's been notified of a child being sick. Now, if a child has been removed from the school and we cannot identify any additional areas where the child has been enrolled in the school, we will go out and do a check on that because that's abnormal. The majority of the ones that we receive for our screening process, our admins have been trained to identify the criminal element that will allow us that reasonable suspicion to start the investigation. It has its check and balances with the supervisor and myself there, and with the review through the dispatch system to ensure that the follow-ups are being conducted with the ones that we do find necessary. As to Mr. Mitchell's question about a prostituted child, we still screen those and we will still send those to our specialized vice unit or over to our child exploitation unit to also do further reviews.
So you and the supervisors are you guys reviewing 100% of the Sky reports that come into you?
We
You
ourselves are
specifically.
not reviewing
Okay.
100%.
Which piece, are you reviewing the ones that have been deemed to be a valid report and needs to be sent out to a field officer? Or are you reviewing the ones that are decidedly not?
We are reviewing the ones that are identified with a concern that may dictate a field response. I do review some to where, a child has not been to school for 3 days. And I'll contact my admin and go through the process of have we contacted the APS? Have we checked for a removal from the city limits into the county? Have we done a thorough enough check to ensure that the reasoning of the Sky report validates a field response? That's those extra layers that we do. We'll look at criminal history. We'll look at, we'll even sometimes call a CYFD investigator that's listed on a portal check from a case for an individual that is 10 years old, just to double check, hey, is anything really being missed and do we need to go out there? Predominantly, we err on the side of caution. It is better on our avenue to send a field officer out to do that welfare check, just to ensure everything is proper. We have not, the primary ones that we are removing from the screening process are, child failed to show up to a eye appointment. The source is a third or fourth party removed. The parentals have not been contacted to provide any kind of justification, and the medical side has not been contacted for any clarification. And those are the things that my administrative staff will look through to see child did not show up to doctor's appointment because child is sick, child has doctor's note, child was, that doctor's note was provided to Sky through a different system or into us through our medical contacts so we can verify there's not a concern for a field officer response.
And do you guys do an audit on those cases that you've kind of said we don't need to look into this any further?
We
Just
have
to make sure?
We have not done an audit just yet on that. We've been going since about I think it's June, I believe. A large majority of, the larger majority of the concerns that we're seeing for the criminal element are already being caught at the sky level and being provided to us as an emergency or priority one. The other elements, again, if there's any side of a concern from our administrative staff, they bring it to a supervisor for a decision. I implemented that layer to ensure that there was additional eyes on that case to give additional guidance to make sure that we're not missing critical information.
What does, you mentioned when you were talking about the community caretaker policy, something that will provide enough probable cause for the officer to enter a residence, whether or not the resident owner or tenant is willing to allow them to come in, right? What does that mean exactly? Will they actually force their way into a home if there's a concern?
Yes. So you've got to consider that the officers predominantly are going to be responding to priority one in emergencies. So the information coming in is that the child has either sustained an injury that is extremely recent, is sustaining an injury, or is exposed to an imminent danger. Those levels require us to go in and intervene into what should be considered a helpless victim. And a individual that is refusing us to be able to enter to that, the officers will utilize their skills and resources as to their best abilities to convince, guide, or proceed in the best pathways forward to gain access to view that child for the safety of that child. Without doing that and checking on the safety of the child, there's a large risk that the information being provided to us could be inaccurate, and we could be potentially leaving a helpless victim to further danger or to a life-threatening situation.
And when it is considered to be a life-threatening situation, what kind of time frame are we looking at? And the only reason I ask is and I understand that this is completely unfair because it came to me through the media, but I remember not terribly long ago, within the last year, I know it was within the last year, an article that came out in the journal about a father and mother who were not living together that called in a report to APD that the mom was threatening to kill the baby, and it was an infant, 1 year and under, kill the baby and kill herself. And that in the article it said that the officers were knocking on the door for 30 minutes. And the woman was responding but not allowing entrance. And so that one's always kind of stuck with me, like, what happens in that kind of a situation? What are the officers trained to do? What are the tools that are available to them in that kind of an instance?
Each situation is unique, and I can't speak of what the officers were thinking at that time or what information that they had. But officers are taught about exigency and entering and forcing entrance into a residence if they can identify and articulate immediate and imminent danger. If they see a unresponsive child through the window as they're banging on the door, that would be, the support to go ahead and enter that residence to try to provide life-saving measures to that child. Or if they hear the child screaming, but they are also able to confirm that the child or that the potential offending party is being engaged verbally, they can look at other means of communication through crisis intervention training or others to try to progress that in a positive way prior to doing a forced entry. But that would be a decision that would need to be made on scene at the time with the judgment of the information available.
Okay, and I know that was a totally unfair question, so forgive me for it, but it's a case that's stuck. And this one, I'm gonna tag team on the training stuff. I know you were sitting here when I mentioned that I recently did a ride-along, and this is a topic that came up during that. So what children's crimes training are required of all officers?
Again, that would be a better question asked to our academy for their training criteria. and how they fully implement their training. We do provide training at the academy through our detectives to guide the officers into investigatory means and methodologies. I do know that they have reality-based scenarios that include juvenile calls, but the specifics would be best answered by our academy.
And that additional training that you refer to is that care training, right? It's provided by your care.
Yes, ma'am.
Care, and you've got 45 officers that are like up to snuff on that and can go out and handle any of these calls.
We
right?
have approximately 45 officers that receive that training, yes.
Out of, I'm gonna guess 900, 950, somewhere in that ballpark these days. The reason I ask is one of the things that came out during the conversation with the officer that I was writing with is that field officers are sometimes a little more reluctant to take calls involving crimes against children because of the lack of training that all officers receive. That care training, while encouraged, is optional. It's not anything that they have to go through, and it's offered, I think he said twice a year? Is that right?
We look at trying to offer it about biannually.
Yeah.
It's dependent upon budgeting and availabilities.
Sure. Okay. So I think that that's one of those things that we probably need to look at a little bit more closely is what trainings are provided to all officers so that they feel confident. Because I'm sure, listening to you talk, that field officers, if an officer is dispatched, that's who goes, probably 95% of the time, right? Unless it's something pretty egregious on its face. Yeah, so it's up to the field officer then to determine whether or not a call to crimes against children is even necessary, right?
Yes.
And so if they don't have the training to sufficiently make that call, we, the community, could be missing just a vast number of calls for children. I mean,
juvenile calls are, they are difficult calls for anybody to take. And there's always the need to side on the air of caution with the juvenile calls. I am very confident that the education the officers receive to investigate this type of call is in line with other major crimes that they have to investigate, such as homicides, major batteries, and so forth. The level that I have seen and that we are actively engaging ourselves back into the field with some additional training is that that air of caution that the officers are trying to identify. They're trying to double check and make sure that they get all points covered. That's one of the reasons why we gave them the checklist to help guide them through that. That's why we're going to do the training with the field supervisors and the FTOs to start filling in those gaps that the information and education is received, but perhaps the application of it is difficult for some officers to go through. Some officers thrive in investigating DWIs, others don't, but the education and the training is the same. Right. And that is also why we looked at the care officers, just like how we did the CIT program historically, is to identify those officers that have more of a passion to take these types of calls to go ahead and elevate those responses.
I really appreciate that. I do think that though that is an area that's been identified, and I will say that from at least one officer's perspective, the lack of training leads to the what ifs. You know, I don't want to take this call because what if I miss something, and then the long range effects of, oh, this case is going to get investigated, you know, maybe I missed something here, and 2 or 3 or 4 more investigations into a family, and then something happens, and it goes, that review of that family and that situation goes all the way back to his investigation, and he might have missed something, and then he's, you know,
I can understand that concern.
So, yeah, that's just something from the officers' perspectives, and I think that we should probably look at that a little bit more, Dr. Cass, with the academy.
I believe we ought to show some mercy, though, to our
No,
speaker.
I'm done. That was my very last.
And thank him for his contribution. This is the discussion that I think the board should have as an agenda item at a different time. I agree that it's been identified here, And I don't think we should torture our speaker anymore while we have a discussion about it, and the rest of the audience as well. But I really do appreciate your coming down. It's
Thanks,
been
sir.
very enlightening, and
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Can we get a copy of your slide decks and maybe
I'll
a separate
do
copy of the handouts?
The only handout that I brought was the New Mexico code for the 48-hour holds. If there's a specific email,
Director Harness or
Okay.
Katrina?
I
Yeah.
can email you the presentation, and I can email a copy of this.
And the checklist, can you do the checklist separate from the slide?
Sure, and like I mentioned, the checklist is going under revision because of SOP changes.
Understood. Thank you so much. Okay, with that, Director Harness, do you have a lengthy presentation for us, sir?
Chair Galloway, I can be very
I
quick.
don't want to rush you. We can do this after a break.
No, it won't take too long. You have received the 6 months of legal billing that was requested. I have provided a copy of the abbreviated Citizens Police Academy schedule to all the parties. On the 3rd of February, I provided the quarterly report to the City Council. On January 21st and 22nd, I attended all of the meetings with the amicis, other stakeholders, U.S. Attorney, and APD compliance. On the 3rd of February, I presented to the Metropolitan Court officers at the APD Academy. On the 21st of February, I'll be presenting to the 122nd Cadet class. March 5th through the 7th, I will be in Austin for NACOL's Academic Symposium and Executive Leadership Forum. On February 28th, myself and Ms. Zagala will be meeting with our budget analyst for the initial budget hearing process to prepare for our hearing in front of the CAO. On the 11th of February, there was the status conference in front of Judge Browning. I think a couple of takeaways from that hearing. Dr. Ginger was adamant that the CPOA plays a vital role in APD's progress, and it's important to keeping the ball rolling. And I think it's important to note that I think we have an ally in Judge Browning as he quizzed Dr. Ginger about the importance of our funding. You were provided a copy of the self-assessment motion. Attorney Rose spoke with you regarding that. The Department of Justice will file their response to the motion by the 24th of February. I believe that the 26th of February motion hearing may be delayed based upon requests from the citizen groups that met with the monitor and the Department of Justice yesterday. In SharePoint, you should be able to now upload and edit documents, but you must do that through Explorer. You cannot do it through Microsoft Edge. It must be done through Explorer. Reminder that next month you have elections for officials, and our office will be closed on Monday. I stand for questions.
I heard you just got some fancy new certification. You want to tell us about that?
I'm sorry?
Fancy new certification in civilian oversight?
Oh, yes. Chair Galloway, I am now a certified practitioner of oversight through NACOL.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Director Harness. We are going to move into our closed session now. We need a roll call vote for our new members, just in case you're unaware. It's just a simple yes or no to move into that closed session.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 All right, we are now in closed session.